You know that quiet moment when something that once felt electric starts to feel ordinary? The messages are still there, the person is still there, nothing is technically wrong, and yet there's a subtle shift. The air isn't buzzing the way it used to. You find yourself wondering when the intensity faded. You feel almost guilty for noticing. Most people don't talk about that moment. They celebrate the spark, they post about the chemistry. But when the spark settles and the fireworks turn into something softer, many quietly interpret that shift as a loss. And if you're someone who feels a strange emptiness when that early intensity fades, you might have decided something about yourself. Maybe you're afraid you get bored too easily. Maybe you think you're incapable of sustaining depth. Maybe you worry you only love the chase. But what if that emptiness isn't shallowness? What if it's your nervous system recalibrating? There's a phase at the beginning of romantic connection that neuroscientists sometimes describe as a biochemical surge. Dopamine spikes, norepinephrine rises, cortisol can increase. Brain scans show heightened activity in reward circuits and reduced activity in regions associated with critical judgment. In simple terms, your brain is lit up. It feels focused, energized, slightly obsessive. You think about them constantly. You replay conversations. You feel more alive. That state is powerful. It's also temporary. Research on attachment and bonding shows that over time, that intense cocktail of chemicals gradually shifts. Dopamine steadies, oxytocin and vasopressin, the hormones associated with longer-term bonding, become more central. The brain moves from pursuit mode to attachment mode. But here's the part that rarely gets explained. Attachment mode feels different. It feels calmer, quieter, less cinematic. If your body got used to the surge, the calm can register as absence, and the mind interprets that absence as emptiness. There's often more underneath that reaction. Our nervous systems are shaped long before we ever fall in love. If you grew up in an environment where attention was unpredictable, where emotional closeness came in bursts, or where intensity was linked to connection, your system may have learned to associate activation with safety. High energy meant engagement. Big feelings meant presence. So when a relationship moves from activation to stability, it can feel like something essential is missing, even if nothing is actually wrong. This isn't about being dramatic, it's about conditioning. The nervous system doesn't chase happiness, it chases familiarity. If you were wired to equate intensity with love, stability can feel like emotional silence, and silence can feel like disconnection. There's also a behavioral layer. Early romance narrows your focus. It reorganizes your identity around anticipation. You check your phone more. You think about how you present yourself. You feel chosen, desired, mirrored. When that phase settles, you return to yourself. Your routines come back. Your separate interests re-emerge. The relationship integrates into your life instead of consuming it. That integration can feel like a drop, not because love is gone, but because novelty is. Behavioral science consistently shows that humans are highly responsive to novelty. The brain releases more dopamine in response to unpredictable rewards than predictable ones. Early love is unpredictable. Will they text? Will they say it back? Will this become something? Long-term connection is more predictable, and predictability is stable, but it's not thrilling. If part of your identity thrives on anticipation, the loss of unpredictability can feel like a loss of aliveness. But this isn't a flaw. Some people are wired to find deep comfort in stability. Others are wired to feel energized by intensity. Neither is superior. They're different nervous system patterns. And most of us contain both. The emptiness after the honeymoon phase often isn't about the other person. It's about the internal shift from stimulation to safety.
And safety, especially if it's unfamiliar, can feel strangely quiet. There's also a paradox here. The very thing that makes long-term love sustainable is the reduction of that early chemical storm. The brain cannot maintain that level of activation indefinitely. It would be exhausting, dysregulating, unsustainable. So the system downshifts. But if your body equates downshifting with losing something, you might unconsciously try to recreate the high through doubt, conflict, fantasy, or withdrawal.
Sometimes people mistake peace for boredom. Sometimes they mistake nervous system regulation for emotional flatness. And sometimes they leave stable connections because the absence of chaos feels like absence of passion. None of this means you're incapable of deep love. It may mean your system hasn't yet learned to recognize calm as connection. There's another quiet layer to this. In the honeymoon phase, you are slightly idealized. So are they. The relationship exists in possibility. Once that phase ends, reality enters. You see flaws. They see yours. The fantasy dissolves into something more human. That transition can feel like grief. Not grief for the person, but grief for the version of the relationship that only existed in imagination. Grief often feels like emptiness. And grief doesn't mean something was wrong, it means something changed. If you feel empty after the honeymoon phase ends, it may be your nervous system mourning stimulation, adjusting to safety, and integrating reality all at once. That's not dysfunction, that's adaptation. It's also worth saying clearly, wanting intensity is not immature. Wanting stability is not boring. Different people regulate differently. Different attachment histories produce different emotional rhythms. No style is morally better, but awareness changes the experience. When you understand that the emptiness isn't proof that love disappeared, it's often a biological and psychological shift. You stop panicking about the feeling itself.
You become curious instead. Is this true disconnection? Or is this my body adjusting to something steadier than it's used to? Sometimes the emptiness softens when you build novelty intentionally, shared experiences, growth, new conversations. Sometimes it softens when you realize the calm isn't absence, it's trust. And sometimes it reveals that the connection truly wasn't aligned beyond chemistry. The point isn't to force an outcome, it's to interpret the feeling accurately. Because when feelings are misinterpreted, we make decisions to escape them. When they're understood, we respond differently. If this is something you've felt, it doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're incapable of commitment. It doesn't mean you only love excitement. It may mean your nervous system learned to associate intensity with aliveness, and now it's being asked to experience aliveness in a quieter form. That transition can feel like emptiness before it feels like depth. There's nothing defective about that process. There's something human about it. And if this resonates, if you've ever questioned yourself in that quiet shift from spark to steadiness, there's more to understand about how your nervous system shapes your relationships. Sometimes what feels like loss is just transformation happening without fireworks.